The term culture originates from the Latin word cultivate. Communities are generally made up of people who share cultural characteristics. These cultural characteristics are defined by various influences, including geographical, spiritual, and agricultural considerations. Certain cultures impose distinct limitations or boundaries that make them unique. The purpose of this program is to introduce you to the most interesting and unique cultures from around the world. Today, we will venture to Transylvania, a country that has forever been associated with the terrible Count Dracula. Bram Stoker's novel about the bloodthirsty Count made this country world-renowned. We, however, are more interested in this country's unusual culture than a fantasy tale. Unlimited speed for all vehicles outside urban areas, ubiquitous powerful motorcycles, a horse-drawn tram, and a parliament established back in 979 AD. This is the Isle of Man. It is an island in the middle of the Irish Sea, the kingdom of herring fishing. Transylvania, also known as Siebenbürgen, takes up the entire western part of Romania. The natural and historical boundary of Transylvania is formed by the southern and western Carpathian mountain range, which surround this harsh, natured area. Alongside a Romanian majority, a significant Hungarian minority also lives in Transylvania. Over the centuries, many Germans lived here as well. During the communist era, and especially after its fall, many Germans moved back to their homeland. It has always been common knowledge that Romanians were mostly lumbermen and shepherds. Hungarians were blacksmiths, and Germans were mostly farmers or merchants. The herd of sheep seen here belongs to the Muzin. The sheep are of the Zupcana breed, a type of sheep that gives good wool and plenty of milk. A female can weigh up to 100 kilos, and a ram even more. Apparently, the sheep milk, cheese, and wool are not in much demand, so it is possible that the shepherd may return to his original profession in the forest. The potato farming seems a little more promising. It is very likely that none of these sacks will make it to the market, but will be distributed among the relatives that have come to help with the harvest. In stark contrast, this winemaker, Todorut Florian, save for one helper, will be left to tend to his vineyard by himself. Ever since he has retired, he grows wine on 40 acres. He cultivates 3 types of grapes: Traminer, Muscat, and Riesling. Unfortunately, the harsh conditions do not favor wine cultivation. As a result, he is often forced to mix the different types, just as his father once did to acquire a drinkable blend. Despite the harsh living conditions and the back-breaking labor, farmers consider themselves lucky. A livelihood is not easy to come by in Transylvania or in Romania as a whole. The people are often driven to extremes, just as these gypsies living on a skip. They work hard day after day collecting scraps of metal from the piles of waste and soil. On a good day, they collect about 10 euros worth of metal, which they transport to collection points in their decrepit carts. Romania is part of the Balkans, and as such, is subject to somewhat strange regulations governing the roads. On these poor roads, you are likely to see cars, motorcycles, herds of donkeys and sheep, even horse and ox-driven carts. The coachmen usually build their own carts, and to do so, they often use the chassis and tires of old vehicles. They'll basically use anything they can get their hands on.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required.
There are no limits to fantasy. Look, is that an ox-driven cart that resembles an armored vehicle? Not bad for a homemade effort. Brasov is a town in Transylvania established by Germans. It was initially named Kronstadt. Speaking of names, it may be worth a mention that in the 1950s, this town went by the name Orosel Stalin after one of history's greatest villains. Legend has it that a rat catcher called the Pied Piper of Hamelin led 130 children away from the town of Hamelin in Saxony. When the Saxons built Brasov in the 13th century, they did so with a German influence. There is plenty of evidence to suggest strong German influence all over Transylvania. A great example of this German influence is this well-preserved stone fortress with beautiful wooden courtyard balconies. It could easily have once served as a hideaway for a whole village. Saxon influence is also obvious in the historical center of Cebu, which is one of the initial 7 principal towns widely inhabited by Germans. This is the origin of the name Siebenburgen, now Transylvania. Today, it is one of the last strongholds of the disappearing German minority. Given the typical German architecture, many visitors can become unsure whether they really are in Romania. Cebu was awarded the European City of Culture for 2007. Here, culture had to enforce itself. Despite its 400-year tradition, this theater group has no choice but to rehearse in an old factory in order to maximize its budget. The government supports culture less and less, continuously reducing grants. Times are tough in general, not just for cultural projects. The gypsy bands have better things to worry about than government grants. They can earn a good living working in pubs or even entertaining at christenings. Some bands do well performing outside of Romania. In a pub, requesting a special song will set you back 100 euros. This is not the case of these gentlemen who seem to be torturing their unfortunate listeners. Istvan was born to work with metal. He has grown up in a blacksmith's workshop starting from about the age of 2. From the age of 9, his grandfather allowed him to work unsupervised. He got to shoe his first horse only a few years later. One need not be a specialist to recognize that Mr. Gabora enjoys his work and that he is exceptionally good at it.
No.
He certainly has had many opportunities to fine-tune his craft in the village of Viskri. Viskri lies in the eastern part of Transylvania. Its fortified church, built in 1100, has been on the UNESCO National Heritage Site list since 1993. The picturesque ambience of the village is further enhanced by one significant inhabitant, Charles, the Prince of Wales. It is no joke. The prince has purchased a homestead in the village. It is a refurbished building and rather humble, but it does include a bathroom. Through his purchase, the heir to the British throne wished to aid the preservation of the unique architecture. And the prince apparently has a blood tie to Romania. His great-great-aunt Mary was Romania's queen. The church is an integral part of any Romanian village. It is the traditional center of the spiritual and social life of the village community. Parastas is an important part of it. It is a mass usually practiced by Eastern Christian churches to commemorate the departed. Parastas is usually carried out on the day of the first anniversary of the death, but it can also be held a few years onwards. Following the mass of a deceased father, the bereaved proudly pay the priest. They are given kolac, a bread-like bakery product, and a glass of schnapps to toast the departed. The parastas continues at the gravesite where the priest recites prayers designated especially for this service. This is the region of 7 castles, many legends, and the echoes of times long gone. It is a harsh country with battle-tested existence, yet it remains unbroken. La Revedera, Transylvania. A different nook of Europe lies ahead. Same continent, so many differences. We are off to the Isle of Man. Welcome to the Isle of Man. It is a tiny bit of land in the middle of the Irish Sea surrounded by 7 kingdoms: Northern Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales, the Kingdom of Manana, the legendary local little god, the Kingdom of the Sea, and of course, the Kingdom of Heaven. 80,000 people live on a surface area of 572 square kilometers. During the 8th century, the island was ruled by the Vikings, then by the Norwegians, who then handed it to the Scots. As of the 14th century, the Isle of Man belongs to England. Though Great Britain owns the Isle of Man, it is a self-governing British Crown dependency. As such, it has its own judicial system, its own domestic and monetary policy, and its own legislative council. The Parliament of Man, also known as Tynwald, is one of the world's oldest continuously functioning parliaments. It was established 1,000 years ago. Its annual ceremonial meeting takes place in July on Tynwald Hill. That day also commemorates the island's National Day. All the important representatives of the state converge to hear about new laws enacted by Tynwald during the previous year. A member of the royal family must be present at each of the ceremonial annual meetings to make sure that the Queen, the official head of state, remains well informed about the direction in which the territory is headed. Though she is responsible for the territory's destiny, she cannot influence it directly in any way. So, while the locals peacefully dictate all domestic affairs, the United Kingdom, headed by Her Majesty the Queen, is responsible for the territory's good management. Seems like a pretty good deal. The Tynwald meets a little more traditionally every other year, in its building in the capital of Douglas, where a quarter of the island's population lives. The island's coat of arms, the Triskelion, is seen on this building, as well as throughout the island. The coat of arms is made up of 3 running legs, bent at the knee and linked in the center. It can be seen virtually on every corner. The interlocked Triskelion is supposed to mean the symbol of the sun, but the inscription, Quoican juturus stabit, whithersoever you throw it, it will stand, could be interpreted as the symbol of stability. Whatever its exact meaning, there certainly is no lack of visibility for this symbol on the island. The people of the Isle of Man honor their traditions and their past. The local parliament is an obvious example, but so is the horse-drawn tram, once a symbol of progress, today a pleasant breath of history. It has been traversing this waterfront for over 130 years. It operates within the regulations of modern transportation and is a joy to passengers of all generations. There are no digital watches, only good old hand-wound clocks. The 27-kilometer electrical railway, otherwise known as the tram, is another noteworthy attraction that has been in operation for over 100 years. The Isle of Man is the regular annual host to the oldest motorcycle race in the world, the Tourist Trophy. Bikers rip down these winding roads on their motorcycles at an average speed of 200 kilometers per hour. There is plenty of danger lurking on the course. Incredible high-speed jumps, curbs, fences, and stone walls. These difficult conditions do unfortunately claim their victims. The locals say those who passed away did so doing something they loved. The inhabitants of Man believe their island is the best location in the world for racing. Neither the racers nor the fans are the least bit deterred by the high number of fatal accidents. The Tourist Trophy is considered a part of the cultural heritage. This is not the only competition that the locals are addicted to. Here in the town of Castleton, we find the Gothic castle known as Russian, built in the 16th century, and the most historically important place on the island. The most important event of this little town is the World Championship Old Bathtub Race. All participants must dress up in something funny, sign up for one of the events, and most of all, be willing to get wet. The events include the men's race, the women's race, and the team race, known as the snake race. There is also a race involving a rope, judged by accuracy, and a jumping race in anything one can find. The highlight of the day is the rowing race in old metal bathtubs. The championship is organized by a group that calls itself the Association of All Drunkards and is sponsored by local breweries. Needless to say, the association and the breweries ensure that it is always a merry event. The fish within the Irish Sea that surrounds the Isle of Man are so abundant, it goes without saying that fishing is the island's main source of income. The most common catch is herring, but other seafood, such as scallops, are also plentiful. Queenies, or queen scallops, is the name of the local scallops. These scallops are smaller than the common scallops, but are cheaper and have a less distinctive taste. The locals don't normally indulge in this locally produced fare. The vast majority of what's produced here is designated for export to Europe. As they say, no one is a prophet at home. Apparently, that goes for mussels too. One, two, three, four. You count well. What you see here are Manx show sheep, known as Lotan. This breed nearly became extinct in the 1950s. Fortunately, though, a certain Greek man, Mr. Stereopoulos, moved to the island and decided to revive the breed. He fell in love with the beautiful Mrs. Diana, but it was later learned that he was actually enchanted by her sheep. They are bred mostly for their meat. The sheep's meat is quite low in fat and cholesterol. As such, it is in great demand by prestigious London restaurants. On the island, you can enjoy a proper English pub to your heart's content. Here, the owner of the pub also runs the local brewery. He understandably has the same passion for beer as do his guests. It is forbidden to use blue vitriol, paradisiacal seeds, guinea pepper, and opium in making beer. At least, this is what the ancient beer-making law states. The law was passed because brewers were known to try and avoid the tax man by claiming that in reality, what they brewed is a non-alcoholic drink. Instead, they used narcotic substances, including opium. God bless the wise Tynwald. Today, local beer is considered relatively good. The beer brewed in the Bushes Brewery is a good example. Its quality is underlined by the fact that it is consumed well before it can go bad. The quantity produced is barely sufficient to meet the island's demand. As Martin, the owner, likes to say, the Isle of Man is nothing but 80,000 alcoholics living on a single rock. He could not have chosen a better place for his business. Dance parties also add to the brewery's prosperity. This is one of many. They are usually held on farms where the farmers get to enjoy local delicacies, gossip, and have a good time. That's the way to go. Life on the Isle of Man is filled with hard work and good times. All this while keeping one's principles in mind and respecting the legacy of one's ancestors. The Manx are justifiably proud of their unique island country.